Righty. If we could go ahead and call the meeting here together for the Water Commission, April 22nd at 3:31. All right, a little bit behind there. But it looks like we do have a quorum, and looks like we have members at our front table. Jim Maris will be joining us, I think, online up above us. But at this point in time, I'm just going to real quick go over just the ground rules, a couple things, and then I want to turn it over to those that are online to be able to introduce who's available up there. And after that, then we'll get back into the agenda, at which point in time we'll talk about what we're going to be doing today, and then we'll turn it in, and it begins. But at any rate, it'll be a different kind of a day today from that standpoint. Just quick ground rules. Please check and make sure that your cell phones are turned to a quiet mode. That's one. Number two, if you can, when you talk, please use your name. I'm the biggest violator, so I do have another rule. If I forget, your job is to remind me. So, and I know I do. So, but it's important to establish a record and people know who it is. And we'll move into that at that point in time. So now, anybody have anything before we begin they want to add, go to the order or anything right now? No. All right, let's turn it over, and we'll have them introduce all those that are up there online behind us, please. Can you hear? Are you back there?
Thank you. We have Jim Morris, Kevin Rance, and Kim Harburg online.
Okay, great, thank you. Make sure if somebody, I can't see the screen, they're turned around here today, so if someone needs to speak up there, if somebody out here would please get my attention and make sure that we call on them and we give everybody an opportunity. All right, yeah, no throwing pins. That's good. Okay, with that, what I'd like to do then right now is, we just called it to order, and I want to just talk about today's, before we get into the minutes issue. Oh, yeah, we need to talk about today's agenda, but when I do, I just want to say this. It's going to be pretty busy. You know, this is the scope document. I think we've all been given an order of it. We have 3 or 4 people have submitted comments. We want to give them an opportunity to explain what their thoughts were behind the comments they made of things that we should consider. We want to give everybody else then an opportunity who chooses to and who wants to participate and provide any additional comments to also do the same thing. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll move into approval of the meeting minutes for the Water Commission for March 25th. Anybody have any changes? Updates? Yes, James?
Let's see. Is this on?
Yes.
Good. This is James Eklund, and I had 2 notes. One, it's noted that I arrived at 4:04 p.m. I was actually on the phone until I got in the room, just for what it's worth. And then on the approval on the gray water, incentivized gray water measures, I voted aye, and it wasn't captured in there.
Okay. Do we have that, Katie? Okay. Okay, so we have 2 corrections that we need to make to the minutes. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, then I need a motion to approve the minutes with the corrections as provided.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Okay, we're good to go. With that, we're going to get into member discussion, and what I'd like to do is I'm going to just start around the room probably and trying to remember who provided some opportunities or some input at this point in time, and just give us a chance to participate with them. So I'm going to start with Trish. So if you could please highlight which, in the documents that have been provided, which one were your comments, and if you could explain to us what, when, where, how, why, and that'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Tricia Bernhardt. So these are just some of the changes that I was proposing. Basically, a little more in-depth analysis of groundwater in Douglas County. So that was an emphasis throughout as I put this together. The assessment of future and existing water demand and supply, I think, is really important that we get it straight. And I think there's just still a lot of ambiguity about where our water is coming from. So much of it is coming from groundwater, and we kind of seem to cover that up, hide it, say that we're using renewable water, et cetera, et cetera. We really need to understand exactly where the water is coming from in Douglas County and how much groundwater we're using. So I emphasize that a lot in this, in the changes here. Just more coordination with USGS, Colorado Division of Water Resources, CSU, anybody else that has been working on collecting groundwater data and making sure we're getting that information pulled together in a timely manner. Mapping of wells and an understanding of where they are. Again, information that sometimes is kind of hard to get and hard to pull together. Where are all the large municipal wells? Excuse me. And just emphasizing again a need for a robust groundwater model that gets us out to the year 2050. And that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So at this point, why don't we move, any questions anybody has on Tricia's? Okay, Clark, I think you supplied some input, and which ones are they? What color was your, make sure we're looking at the right ones?
Mine is the one that has yellow.
Perfect.
So, and what I did was just took the plan that we started with and where it's in yellow, that means I either added or changed a little bit. So the first item on the top of, I guess it's the second page, I just added, again, those are a couple other organizations that I thought ought to get the educational process, or that the consultant ought to interface with: the school board, the economic development collaboration partners in the county, and the DC fire departments. And I'll mention the fire department a little later here, or in the next item. Down under the mapping, I think mapping is a really important aspect of this, because what we're doing is showing the public by different mapping characteristics what has happened and what's been done. And we can distinguish between different parts of the county. And if you remember, I think that's kind of what we saw a lot in the Colorado Springs plan. They had a lot of maps in there and a lot of different colors to represent different areas where there were different capabilities. And I think we, as part of the educational process, that'll be really helpful. So I added 2 points under that for the mapping and data development. The first one, to identify where the existing providers' plans are focused on the long-term needs, and where they have essentially plans that may not be 100% developed yet, but they have plans in process, similar to what we saw from the South Metro Water Supply Authority. But we've got, plans for Parker, plans for Castle Rock, plans for Centennial Water, all that reach out into the year 2050 and beyond. And I think that kind of data should be mapped. I added something about fighting purposes in there, and I think this data, again, is probably relatively easy to get a hold of. I think the insurance companies have it, fire departments have it. But the significance is there are some places in the county where if your house is on fire, the fire department just hooks onto the hydrant. There are other places in the county where if your house is on fire, there's nothing for the fire department to hook onto. And I think we ought to just show that. I think that's important for people to know. Down at the lower half of that page, item 4, I just highlighted Douglas County Water Provider Comprehensive Plans. I felt that what we have so far is a little light on integrating the existing plans that are out there, again, from Parker, Centennial, Metro, South Metro, and Castle Rock, and probably some others. And I went back to the press release that talked about this committee, and why it was formed. And it says the goal of the commission is the integration of existing water provider plans into the 2050 comprehensive plan. It's not to start from scratch and do everything all over again. You know, it's a recognition that there's some good plans out there, and those should be very much a part of the county plan, not separate at all. And then over on the next page, let's see. I really kind of zeroed in on conservation, as you can see, in that I added a whole additional task that's labeled as conservation. And it's throughout here, I thought that we are not emphasizing conservation enough. The original charge to the commission, in addition to all the other things like reuse and supply and so forth, was also to address conservation. And it can make a big difference in the long run forecast of how much water we need in the county, not just on what the growth in the county is, not just on our development, but on how we conserve what our citizens use. And there's, if we can achieve a 20% reduction in gallons per person per day in use over the next 20 or 30 years, that goes a long ways to reducing the forecast of how much the county is going to need in 2050 in total. So I think that this plan needs to gather the data about what are the conservation practices in the county, what the results of those conservation practices have been, and how could that be then pushed into the future, and how that affects the various scenarios for supply. So that's pretty much what I wanted to add to the existing plan. Questions?
Any questions? I do have a couple, if you
Yeah.
can just help me understand them. One, you talked about the fire mitigation and the maps on that. Can you help me with a little more as to what you would say? Only because it seems to me fire mitigation, the fire departments drive that. We have regulations at the county for land use purpose, as every metropolitan area in the county has. And so today, that fire requirements are driven by their policies and their programs and regulations, depending on the fire district. So I'm trying to understand, is it looking at water supply for suppression? Are we talking about prevention? Are we talking about what? And when you were thinking on that?
I'm not sure what the answer to your question is. I'm not making a recommendation on what the outcome ought to be. I'm saying let's gather the data so we know that in 75% of the residents in the county have access to a fire hydrant that provides plenty of water if their house is on fire.
Okay.
But there's another 10% or 15 or 20% that don't have that access. And I just think as we're talking about mapping data relative to water in the county, that should be one of the maps that's provided.
Great.
And what we decide to do with that as a commission, or what the county decides to do with that, what the fire districts decide to do with that, I don't know if that's our call or not. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I think we ought to gather the data.
Okay. Any other questions? Hang on one second. I had another one here. Just real quick. Conservation. When you're talking about water conservation, and we should have certain things and that we're doing like that, I think what you're looking at and including different types of plans that are out there, or?
Yeah, I think, again, as we're gathering data and mapping, we ought to know what kind of conservation is available or required, or possible. Last month, we talked about gray water, for example. I mean, that's, gray water is, the gray water appliances are available in Castle Rock for new homes. I don't think, well, I guess that we'll have to see what happens with the law, and I'm not up on that, as to what the gray water bill has done in the state legislature. But we ought to map that kind of stuff. For example, Castle Rock doesn't let a new development or a new residence put bluegrass in their front yard. Other places in the county, you can put the bluegrass in your yard. And we all know that bluegrass uses more water than not having bluegrass. So I just think we ought to gather that kind of data because, for example, if the county or if all of the municipalities, all of the water and sand districts in the county prohibited, and I don't know whether they can legally do this or not, but if they all prohibited grass in the front yards, we'd use a lot of less water for irrigation in the county. And I think we ought to know what the status of that is throughout the county. And why we're, gathering data and mapping stuff, it's not just mapping how much people use today, it's what influences how much they're going to use tomorrow. And I mean, we're talking about a 2050 plan. And if we had regulations everywhere that prohibited extensive irrigation, and I'm just making stuff up here, if we had gray water systems everywhere, I don't know if those make a significant difference or not. But if we had lots of the low flush or low water use toilets. If we have a requirement for low water use washers, washing machines and dishwashers and that stuff, that's going to make a difference on how much water the county requires in the future. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong or indifferent. I just think we ought to gather the data. And we can make a judgment on that in the future. We can't make a judgment on it without gathering the data.
Yeah,
So do you
right-
want questions, or are we supposed to comment?
No, I think right now, I think questions or comments, just raise your hand if you have something you want to say.
So comments as
Yeah.
well?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think the county should be getting into the business of each individual municipality and water district. And that's what that is. I mean, they have practices in place. I mean, this is like the state legislature telling us, you have to increase your density. We want 3 times the population in Douglas County. How are we supposed to come up with a water plan when the state legislature is going to tell us how much water we're going to use?
Yeah.
I mean, it's stupid. And so it's the same thing. If an agency has plenty of water to meet their demand, what are we going to do? No, you guys wasted money buying those water rights. You have to conserve your water and give these people who are idiots, your water. No. I mean, I agree we should look at what's in the plan, but it kind of goes into the phased approach. Do we have a problem, or are we trying to provide a solution and then try to find the problem? So that's part of it. Is it too early? I mean, the state kind of says they want to look into conservation and that stuff because it does benefit everybody. But, I mean, you're getting into, local control.
Yeah, I'll just respond with two points. One, I'm not suggesting that, I'm not saying anything about what kind of regulations or requirements ought to be imposed at the county level, at the local level, so forth. All I'm suggesting is we can't even have a discussion without first gathering some data. Secondly, and I typed this off because this is a quote from, I think, the original press release, original material coming out of the county as to why this group was formed. And one was to identify strategic, I'm reading this, identifying strategic policies addressing infrastructure, storage, supply, reclamation, conservation practices, water land use nexus, and agricultural efficiency. So I'm just trying to respond to what we were asked to do. And you can't, if we ignore conservation in this plan, we're ignoring what we were asked to do.
Yeah, I think one thing, if I can just, this is Jack. I think when it comes to conservation, we all know that water regulations, development regulations are based upon whatever municipality or entity has control of the land use regulations for that area. That area then, and that land use regulations are going to be driven by what those people are saying they're doing. So those water providers, and I think we heard South Metro actually comment on how they've been doing water conservation programs for a long time. The question becomes, who is, who isn't? Can we identify and measure the benefits? So, not that we can go back and tell them what to do, but I think it's so that we can adopt certain plans or programs that might be beneficial as we see them and make recommendations to the commissioners about that. So I think gathering the data is what I think you're getting to, Clark, and just saying, is it there? But I agree, I don't think none of us here are sitting here knowing or feel that we have the ability to walk out of here and start telling water providers and municipalities what you're going to do, because it's not going to happen. And so I think that's good that we can collect it all, and then we can understand in reality what the true impact has been. Was it beneficial to do it this way or that way? And if that's the case, these are the net benefits of how much can be saved, reused, and driven. And there's examples of developments in the community that can provide incredible data on how much their usages are positively impacted. And I'm sure Castle Rock's got it. They all have them, I know. But I think it's not bad to have a repository. At least we can take a look and say, we have to. I don't know, and I don't know this answer. I don't know if the county has a specific water conservation plan that every developer or every entity has to follow or implement. And if they don't, then all right, we need to just take a look at what's available out there, and maybe Mimic can come up with a recommendation for consideration. And that might be, I think, what we're talking about here. In both sides. So I think what you're really talking about is gathering the data. And I happen to agree with Frank. I don't think we want to go out and start trying to tell people we have no control over what they're going to implement or do. So I don't think that that's the case in either way. Any other questions? Yes, Harold?
I think Clark hit on one of the most important things that I didn't realize when I first read it. I want to focus back on the mapping. We've had a couple of requests now. We have communities on individual wells or systems in Woolies, wildfire interface areas that don't have anything other than a well. And I think if we go into the mapping, like he's saying, mapping these communities that don't have fire flows, we need to particularly focus on those in a wildfire interface area. They've been permitted years ago, but they're out there with a well, and you know if there is a wildfire that comes through, you have to assume the electricity will be cut off, the wells don't work. So how do you fight that fire? And I think, and it is the fire department's role, but they pretty much picked up what was handed to them. So I think we should be mapping carefully those communities on individual wells that are community on individual wells or community wells in the middle of a wildfire interface zone. That should be part of our mapping.
Okay. Frank?
We have a place up in Fraser on a well. The fire department knows we don't have water. Every fire department that serves an area knows who has water and who doesn't and what they have to do. I think that goes beyond. I mean, yes, it's part of a water supply requirement. You design the distribution systems and your storage for fire flow. It's part of the requirement of the municipality. I think it goes beyond, is there adequate water supply? I mean, it's high flow, but it is very low demand compared to anything else.
Yeah, Roger?
Thank you. I appreciate everything I'm hearing here, and I think we could study 100 different data points. I think we need to break it down to its smallest components. I'd like it to keep it as cheap as we possibly can. I mean, honestly, because we could spend a ton of money and have the most comprehensive data as possible. I would like to see an inventory of what we have, and we could talk about fire. We could talk about hydrants, we could talk about tons of data points. I just want to know what we have. I want to know how many wells we have. I want to know what the aquifer looks like. I want to know what we have. That's all I want, basics. I was okay with the first document because it specifically just says that. What do we have? Where is it? How long is it going to last? Where is it falling? That's all I want. I want something simple. I want something I can read. I want something I can pass out to my residents where they can see it, they can read it, where we can educate people and they can look at it and go, oh, okay. And then what municipalities want to do with it, what the commissioners want to do with it, what water providers want to do with it, that's up to them. We just are going to provide the most comprehensive, something we don't even have. I mean, I can't believe Douglas County, as much as we're growing, we don't have it. Elbert County has it. We don't have it. That's all I want. How we move that conversation forward, let's do that. But that's what I want.
Great, thank you, Roger. Any other questions or comments at this point? Well, why don't we move on to the next person who's provided some comments. Let's go to Harold. I think you provided some comments for our review.
I did. I think Roger has read mine, and because that's really what the heart and soul.
Harold, I'm sorry, which one's?
I'm the blue.
Okay.
I think there might be two-tone blue. I'm not the purple, I'm the blue. So I started with basically exactly what he said, and evaluates the aquifer, its reliability and quality, and identification of risks of the aquifer from present use and expanded use. I think we need a fresh look.
Harold, you're the red and what we got.
Oh,
Yeah, there it goes, red, okay.
they tricked me. I'm sorry, I was blue, but I thought it's, anyway, forgive me. So I'm the red. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm the red. Yes, the valuation of the aquifer, which is basically what Roger's saying, what do we have? And I'm suggesting we do a fresh look. You know, I think when we audit our company, we change auditors every 5 to 7 years just so you get a complete fresh look from someone who doesn't have a vested interest in it, and conduct a fresh look review of the basin, of the bioaquifer, and the reliability and anticipated resilience under policies and anticipated growth, which I think is what you were saying, Roger. And then estimate the a lot of our water districts have tremendous and excellent capital or plans for water development. And the one thing I've learned in my life is that water runs uphill to money. And so in order to make that work, I think as part of this, we should also be looking and just gathering data on anticipated capital needs to bring in some of the waters that are planned. On study area, I did add, I think in municipalities, we only have one municipality that's also a water provider. I think we should include the special districts, since most of the water comes from special districts.
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
If you look under study area, third line down, it says municipalities, and then I added and water special districts is all. Under project timeline, I think the proposal as we go forward, we want a master evaluator, but I think they may want to bring in a special hydrology firm to take a look at the aquifer. And I know that may cost more money, but I think then we'll know what we don't know what we have. That'll tell us what we've got and anticipated what we can anticipate the next 30 years. On the next page, the project management, I added the Rural Water Authority community. I think they should be included in that along with others, South Metro and et cetera, the Colorado Water Plan. Under tasks, estimated capital needs, I sound like a broken record because, you know, the cheapest thing you ever do is get the water. The most expensive thing is how you deliver it and understanding what the capital requirements of the county are going to be. And on mapping, I already shot my comments with you. I think we need to include particularly communities without fire flows. On groundwater analysis, I believe we identify those areas which rely on our groundwater and are at risk in 10 to 20, 30-year time frame, and identify which areas and aquifers should not be used or expanded. We have some of that now coming back with some discussion about expanding some of the margins. Which aquifers shouldn't we be using and for what purposes? I think they can give us some analysis on that based on their decline flows. One of the things I didn't put in on the groundwater analysis, I really think is important, is how we define renewable water. Reusable water is not renewable water unless it comes from a renewable source. And so I think we must not confuse ourselves by saying, well, it's renewable water because we reused it. No. Reusable water, renewable water. They're fundamentally different unless they come from a renewable source. And the land use scenario, I changed this is consistent with South Metro Water Supply Plan. South Metro Water represents the larger districts. They don't represent the whole county. And they also represent districts in Arapahoe County. So they do good work. We're a member. I think they do great work. But it shouldn't just be consistent with what they're doing. It should be used as part of our overall model, South Metro. On the next page, this would be under section land use scenario. Continuing, I added a full build-out conditions. I added the concepts about capital requirements to serve an area to connect to renewable water. Because sometimes it's easy to develop something and say, oh, we're going to connect someday to that water plant. All right, what's it going to cost? Because the developer's gone. Those residents are going to have to pay for it. So I think we need to understand what some of that will be going forward. On demand and supply analysis, the last line where it says expect to be developed using individual wells or new special districts or community wells, and the cost of connecting to more robust service. It keeps coming back to cost to connect. And on the last page, my last page, I added to develop capital needs analysis to fund existing water infrastructure plans of districts and municipalities and for rural water users anticipated in the 10, 20, 30-year program. What's the capital needs going to be? And 3, policy changes to enhance and protect the aquifer as it relates to new and expanded land use and preserve it for drought protection. I think we should add that recommended policy changes, because I think if they do a zero-based analysis and we look at it, they'll have some ideas on what we should be doing to protect. And I think they should deliver that if they have them. Then on final report analysis on the second bullet, impact on the aquifer as both the supply and drought protection source. The next one, infrastructure and capital needs. Keep coming back when you say infrastructure, add the capital cost to it. The next bullet, I added a new one, areas of risk of aquifer supply quality and usability over that period of time. Let's don't forget significant issues with some of our aquifer water, radon and other issues. Is it really usable? I would put emphasis on the Denver and Dawson Reservoir in rural areas because of the shallower upper reservoirs that individual wells are on. Put municipal pumps on, you drain them. And then last, mitigation of impact and protection of existing properties. In a way, an example of that would be the Dawson and the Denver. You put a municipal well near it and they have these individuals on the Dawson and Denver, it's going to dry it up. At least I think it will. So those are the kinds of things I think that they should be looking at.
Frank?
Yeah, I think that cost goes beyond the scope of what we're doing, because the cost really goes back to each district. I mean, yeah, it's a way of evaluating alternatives, but how much detail do we want to do on cost estimates? I mean, that's kind of up to each district. So I question whether, all the cost estimates should be part of this. Maybe, later down the road, that was one. And then the other item was under, task 3, groundwater analysis. Harold, you put further identify, which areas and aquifers should not be used for development. I just found out last week that Douglas County actually has done some groundwater analysis. We actually have a plan for what water can be used and not used. So on the western edge of the Denver aquifer are these margin A, margin B. Margin A, you can't drill a well. You're not allowed to drill a well in margin A. Margin B, you can only use 50% of the allotted capacity for that area. So that was, I think, both Tricia and I commented about this, what both Arapahoe County and El Paso talked about this 300-year versus 100-year. Well, if we went to 300-year, we would be wiping out those margins I mean, margin B already has a 300-year capacity, basically. And, yeah, so that's a good point. It would have been nice to know that the county had actually done some groundwater modeling to come up with those margins.
Tricia?
Bernhardt. So Frank, you're referring to 18A, which has been done in years past and done by Lidl and their consulting group, et cetera. I personally think all of that needs to be relooked at. I could find some flaws in it. Others who are experts in hydrogeology could find some flaws in it. I think we really need to look at 18A and reevaluate it.
Yes, Sean?
Sean Tonner. I actually agree 100% with Harold that we have to look at the financial modeling, because if you're going to measure, you can come up with all these grandiose ideas, but if you have no way to provide the capital to make them come to fruition, or the districts don't, as evident by when we had the ARPA fund solicitation, I believe we had $200 million of requests for $65 million out there. I think that was just barely cracking the door. So I think we have to look at what is going to be the financial need to get us to a 10, 20, 30, 100-year water supply plan.
So you think we need to do that as a county? The people, the districts that need additional supply,
Absolutely.
the county's going to provide them.
I didn't say they would provide. I said I think we need to evaluate that, because if we don't know what that liability is out there or what it's going to take to get us to a renewable system in this county, if we're just doing piecemeal and relying on some that provide data, others that don't provide data, and it's not in a coherent package, then, I mean, a lot of this is just academic at that point.
Anybody else? Guys, don't be bashful. I see eyes turning, so people have gotten things going on here. I mean, my 2 cents, I think the problem with the financial analysis is going to be how deep do you go? Because now all of a sudden you've got engineering requirements, you've got a whole lot of other issues, infrastructure engineering that come into that play. And that's a huge undertaking, as anybody in water knows, has been involved, when just the engineering aspect alone is going to be financially huge. I think what can be done is to be able to say, based on parameters or something, there are certain things that it could be at a very, very high level. But I think that's all it would be. But I happen to agree with Roger, going back to that point. I think one of the things we have to find out first is what do we have, and then what's our demand. With those two, then we can begin to establish, okay, we know where our problem areas are, we know what this is, we know what that is, and then away we go with it. Let's also keep in mind, I believe that the water providers, when we say let's provide the capital cost, that's all of the unincorporated area. Because quite frankly, I think the water providers do their own engineering, their cost structures, and they provide all of that on their own. But I don't know if on this initial scope, prior to what we can do is have a placeholder maybe. I'm just trying to figure it out. Because when I look at cost of water and you start talking about capital, I mean, you're talking about engineering. And now when you get down to engineering, that's, okay, now where are we at? That's a whole new cost structure. It gets pretty big. I didn't see that included in any of the other plans, or any of El Paso, Albert, or Alamo, or Arapahoe's. I think it's an important equation that has to be taken into consideration at some point. But I think right now, I think one thing we definitely want to get is where are we and what do we need? And I think that's even the highest critical amount. Once we know that, then I think we're going to know the assessment of how big our problem is if we have a problem, and then how do we address, or how can it be addressed? Not how do we address it, but how can it be addressed for those who are in the power and you have the authority to make those decisions on behalf of the county. So I think that's one thing we want to keep in mind, because I can see the cost of this scope get going and the timing for it just go huge unless there's people that are providing that at that point. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I think that sources, I just don't know if we're going to get that, because it's a very competitive market when we talk about water, and everybody's, you've got sellers, you got buyers, and the buyers aren't talking if they're in the market because they don't want anybody to drive the cost up. So it's a kind of an interesting issue there. I think we had some other comment. Oh, are there any more comments on these items? Don? No. Okay, Don, do you have some comments you wanted to add too, right? Okay. Think you provided some stuff?
Okay. Are we good?
We're
Sound
good, but make sure we know where you're at in the document.
Okay. I'm Don Langley here. I went the old-fashioned route and actually wrote a memo.
Okay.
So I didn't do it in track changes, although I have a track change version I can deliver if somebody wants to. So maybe I've taken a little bit different tact in that my basic recommendation is to try and break down this project into phases and try and execute in a phased manner so that you do the work in phase 1, that informs what you want to do in phase 2, and then maybe what you want to do in phase 3. So phase 1 would be very foundational. Phase 1 would be getting a project management process established. That's kind of part of the process, maybe the mapping and development, but really focus on the demand and supply analysis. I am a big fan of the gap analysis that was done by, you having a hard time? I was a big fan of the gap analysis done by El Paso County. I thought that really hit it pretty square on the head. They did get a lot of data from the water providers. They also made a pass at trying to attack what's going on in the rural side. They went through and categorized all the wells. They located, all the rural wells, separated those out into exempt, non-exempt. They separated the wells out that were in the district providers, and then they assigned, a level of consumption for each one of those wells so that there was a presence of the wells in with the rest of the supply analysis. The supply data they got from all the water providers, they did that through an information request. That information request is detailed in the El Paso plan, the exact information they asked for. I actually converted that into a Word document, ran that by the district manager at Parker Water and said, is this hard? And the response I got is, this is not a heavy lift. This is something that could be done without a lot of inconvenience to the water providers. They're doing a lot of this work at the same time for South Metro, so it's a question of getting the data that we want and getting it in a format that we want. But I think if we do, each one of these providers also would then give us their projected demands, long-term and at build-out, and we would see the gap. We would see the gap by provider, and we would see the gap in the aggregate. And I think that having that knowledge is just so foundational that we need to get started on that. And if we broke that out into a separate phase and we all agreed on that, we could light that off today. And then having that data, and we'll learn as we go. I mean, we don't have to wait till it's all completely done. I mean, we'll get feedback as it goes. Then we can start, on the next phase, which is trying to sort out what do we want to do with land use policy, right? What do we want to try and integrate into there? Is that where conservation is? Do we initiate a public participation at that point in time? Initiate that participation with data in hand. I think Roger was right on. I mean, something we can show people, something people can read. It characterizes what's going on in the county. So phase 2 then would be public participation, land use policy, and that development. That gives us a lot more time as a group too, to work through what are we trying to get to, where are we trying to get to with land use policy. The last phase would then be developing the report, or the plan, I should say. I was a little uncomfortable with the RFP that was reading that the consultant would develop the report and the recommendations. I think we've got to do that. I think that job falls on the commission, and we've got time to do that, and we would work through that, again, from an informed position of both having the demand, the gap analysis done, and also having a first look, or maybe a final look, at what it means to land use policy and what's the best practices, what do we want to try and move into the county, what stays in the districts, and kind of wrap our arms around, where the rubber meets the road, because that's really what this plan's going to do. It's going to influence land use policy more so than anything else, at least in my thinking. I did also say I would eliminate the groundwater analysis. I should clarify that. I would eliminate it as written because it just simply said estimate the amount of water in the aquifers. That's a pretty tall order. Nobody's done that yet. But I like Tricia's language that she used, and Roger, or Harold, excuse me, also hit on it. Once we get this demand analysis underway, once we get get some work started, we can circle back and write a scope, I'd say, for another task, which is a groundwater use analysis. There is a lot of data out there. I actually, this week, got a chance to review a lot of hydrographs from Parker Water. We've got a pretty good sense of where we are on our aquifers, where we are on our levels, where we're monitoring. So there's a lot of information there. There's a lot of different sources. It's a tough topic. We should approach it thoughtfully, and we should approach it with an analysis that's well scoped and gets us good information that we can use. So not eliminating groundwater analysis, I just didn't like the way it was written. And then finally, the Water Commission would then actually draft the water plan. I use the term perhaps in a facilitated manner with the consultant, that can kind of work through it. We've all been through those kinds of things before, maybe in strategic planning or things like that. So that would be the last phase, or phase 3. So it gives us a chance to get going, get the foundational data, and then focus on the future. I would make a comment on conservation. We're all for it, the Parker Water. I've been leaning on our board for the last year. We have a lot of stuff underway. We're going to press ahead irrespective of what anybody else does. Simply for the point that Clark made, it can make a difference. It can make a difference in our peak demand. It can make a difference in what we have to build in 2040 or 2050. But it's got to be real. It's got to be measurable. You got to deliver results. It's not something we can just talk about. We've got to really do it. So certainly for that. And as far as engineering analysis, that's hard. If you're going to try and do capital analysis of stuff that's imaginary, you're not going to get a lot of good results. I would hope, when we get the whole view and we get the big picture, maybe we'll see opportunities we're not seeing today. Maybe we'll see places where we'd say, gee, a pipeline from here to here would make a huge difference, or a small reservoir, or whatever it might be. So if the plan reveals things that we're not seeing, that'd be really valuable, in my opinion. So.
You got any comments? Roger?
Roger Hudson, Castle Pines. I really appreciated several points in your memo. The thing, and it will not be any surprise here, that I appreciated the most was your attention to the RFP when it came to the deliverable. I think if this is written only for an engineer, only engineers will read it. I think it's really important that as we talk about the scope, we really think about who we want this to impact, and that really is the public. For it to have a generational impact on the people of Douglas County, it needs to speak to those people. It needs to talk to the residents and the builders and the developers. It needs to talk to young people. It needs to talk to people who are doing lawns and installing lawns. It needs to talk to people who are designing homes and talking about the future of our county. People who are going to work in our grocery stores and are going to build a future here in our county. And I think it's really important that it's not just a report, that it draws a picture of the kind of county we want. And I think when you talk about an RFP and talk about what we want that deliverable to look like, I think it really is that. It's really talking about the county and scoping out what our inventory is for our water. And because we can't have any development in our county unless we have water. Water is life, and it really is our future. So I really appreciated that you touched on that, and I think that is so important to whatever plan we put together, that it is something that is communicable and people can really grasp it and really understand it. So thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
Any more comments, questions? Harold?
Don, I Really, Harold Smethels. Don, I really like the way you phased it. You know, a lot of us got too deep. Certainly got too deep in the weeds trying on the RFP. I think a phased approach is a good one. The one part, though, I disagree with. The way I computed, 75% of the people in this county are on groundwater. That now they might be on a district, but I'm counting districts that are at least 50% renewable. When you take 50% renewable, not reusable, but renewable, 75% of the residents are on groundwater. And I think when I look at Arapahoe County using LRE, and there's several firms that can do it, do an evaluation, a fresh look at where we are on reliability of the aquifer, I think that has to be an initial step. We need to understand where that is, both in quality, deliverability, and cost. Is it feasible? So I think somewhere early on, we need to understand where are we in the aquifer as a whole, because so much of this county depends on it. And that can go two ways. One of the ways I hope it does, pray it does, is that the aquifer is really in pretty good shape, and then we don't go. Remember, it was about 10 years ago when Denver Post ran those articles that killed property values as a nightmare. If the aquifer is in really good shape, let's know it. If we do have challenges, let's deal with it. So that would be the one area I would part a little bit with you. I think the phased approach is excellent.
Anyone else? Is there anyone else, by the way, online that has any questions at this point? Well, at this, I'd like to turn it to Frank. Frank, you had some comments?
Yes, and mine is the purple.
Okay. The purple, great.
Purple with green. Since I'm a millennial, I did red line.
Small print.
Oh, yeah, it has my initials on the comment side. Basically, there's some editorial stuff there, and I'm not going to talk about that, but, it is doing the two-phase approach, and like Roger said, first of all, let's figure out what the supply and demand is. So that's really what that first phase is to get into a supply and demand. And, then the scope, under the project management, that first task was really data collection. So I moved that because it wasn't project management. So some of the, that's editorial, and then kind of more what project management is, added a few things in there. Data collection really is, making sure we have a good way to collect the data from the different municipalities, water districts, and, get that data. What supplies do they have? What demands do they project? I propose throughout this kind of current 2050 and build out to look at, because, it's important to look at build out, different areas. Great, we get to 2050, what happens when this entity that has more water rights is going to just keep building? You're going to wipe out some of these other areas. So I think we need to look at that on the supply and demand side of things, and then when we get to the master plan, then maybe we only go to 2050 on that. And I feel that groundwater analysis is utmost important because, really, if you look at the municipalities and the districts, they've got their water plans. They know if they have water, they don't have water. And what aren't they going to share information on? It's been brought up here already. You brought it up, Jack. They're not going to tell you what surface water rights they're pursuing. That's not going to be in there. It's groundwater is the only thing that, they're going to be open to sharing. They're going to tell you they have water rights already and they can meet this with surface water, or they need this much groundwater. But it's really who we are trying to protect are the rural residents, that they don't have anybody supporting them. They have a well, in their backyard, and that's it. And if that well goes dry, they're done. And so that's really why the groundwater analysis is important, is that is what will help the rural residents, is looking at the groundwater analysis. you know, and looking at each of the aquifers, it was mentioned, hey, maybe some aquifers, you know, aren't used by some people. Municipalities, special districts, they don't want the Dawson. It just is not economical for them to put in a, you know, well that produces, you know, 10 gallons per minute. That's what the residents use. And, you know, maybe that's it. Do the residents want to go down to the Laramie Fox Hills? Do they want to put in $1 million well for, you know, their home? No. So there's some of that stuff. And so that's why I think the groundwater analysis is important. You know, with the margins, maybe we need to divide up the area. El Paso County came up with their regions for their plan and looked at that. And I think that's a similar thing. We need to look at, you know, different, you know, regions within Douglas County. I mean, you know, you take Centennial Water and Sand District. It's built out. They've got their water. I mean, do that as a separate little entity. Let's not, you know, waste too much time up there. You know, look at some of the other areas that are totally undeveloped now. Greenland. Is that going to be developed in the future? Are they going to want to put in wells and all sorts of stuff? I mean, we need to know some of that stuff. So those are areas that right now, it's just big open space. What's the county going to do with that? And really need input from the planning department in terms of what's future land use plans in terms of looking at that. But that's, big focus is the groundwater. Then the land use, didn't make many changes there other than just some time frames and stuff. And then really the basis of this is come up with, here's what the demand projection is, here's the supply analysis. Hey, look at this. The supply equals or exceeds demand. Our job is done. We don't need to cut, if that's the way it works out, we don't need the phase two. Otherwise, we go into the phase two and really do that, the plan. That's pretty much it. I'll take questions if people have them.
Any questions for Frank?
Oh, Tricia, of course.
Uh-oh. Tricia?
All right. Tricia Bernhardt, just a reminder that groundwater knows no bounds. And this is part of the problem with measuring groundwater and trying to figure out what we have, where we have it available, and where it's going. So when you mention Greenland, of course, my eyes pop open because this is an issue that's very important to people in southern Douglas County. Groundwater knows no bounds, and if you start taking it out at the rate that they have the legal right to do so, we will all be impacted in southern Douglas County. Groundwater does not stay in one place. So, at any rate, very important to analyze groundwater carefully. Again, this county is using more groundwater than any Front Range county. And it's a bit of an embarrassment when I go to water conferences and I hear people giggle about Douglas County and how we haven't done any proactive planning and we don't have any trans-basin diversions, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is a very wealthy county. We should be doing a much better plan of having good water supply and not relying on groundwater as much as we do.
Any more comments?
+1.
Pardon? Oh. Anybody online? Oh. Do you have a comment?
Sean didn't say his name.
Oh. Oh, wait, that was great, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you what I think I'm hearing, and then just have a discussion about this, because let's go back to remembering what we're doing here. We're developing a scope of work that the staff can utilize to develop a bid or a structure to go out and possibly get someone hired to begin doing this stuff. we need to provide them with some direction of what we want. Now, if we're going to do a phased approach, or if we're going to do something else, no doubt about it, I think we're not ready to send out anything right now, because we still need to get a final document that we can look at. I do like the concept of the phased approach. I think it helps nail it down. Over time, we can get to where we need to be. So I think we've got to keep our eye on what we're trying to deliver here with this scope. We're not creating recommendations. We're not creating anything because we don't even really understand the total problem. Other than that, we believe there is a water problem. And so I think it's important that we keep our scope and our mind out here on what we need them to do to provide us information so we can make some determinations and et cetera, and then make recommendations to the commissioners. Once again, they hold everything else at the end of the day. The Board of Commissioners do. So can we just I'd like to start a conversation, because I've heard it come up now 3-4 different times, and would like to get some thoughts or consensus on this issue of what step is next, and do we just ask the staff to come back with a phased approach scope or whatever? Roger.
And just very quickly, and Roger Hudson with Castle Pines, just to add one more degree of difficulty, because sometimes it's all in the writing. I did notice a thread in all the other plans that we heard was grants from the state and funding from other locations. I would encourage that as we talk about this stage of the scope, that we write very intentionally to make access available to these grants, whatever that is. So whatever we have to do, stand on our head and rub our bellies, because this is a large dollar figure, that we make ourselves available to that. So I would encourage staff to, whatever we do, our next steps, to keep us on track, to maybe make ourselves available to those funds.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a
Clark.
conversation with the staff last week, and I think you're prepared to talk a little bit about what might be out there and available relative to grants?
Do you want to talk about grants now,
Just wait.
or can you?
I just don't want to opt out of anything.
Yeah, if we need to.
Okay, just a high level, just a staff position right now, at a high level of what they've been working on regarding grants. So if I can turn it to Katie, who can direct then?
Yeah. Lauren Pulver with staff. Very high level, we are aware that Arapahoe County got some grant funding from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, Metro Roundtable, and South Platte Basin. So we're tracking those deadlines for applications. The next round of application is due September 1st, and then potential to also apply for statewide water plan grants, and that application deadline is July 1st. So we've got our eyes on those deadlines.
Great job. Thank you.
I think it's fantastic, thank you. And that is something. Harold?
Harold Smethels. One thing, too, maybe in addition to grants, teaming could be important. I think of USGS. You know, we just funded through the rural water some additional work with USGS. They normally have very, very robust, I don't know how good it is, data. And so it may be both grants and teaming to get the data we need.
Okay.
And clearly USGS.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you for indulging me.
Pardon?
Thank you for indulging me.
No, indulging, yeah. So the thing I think we really want to begin to have a discussion right now, we've got to give some direction to staff. They're probably sitting up here with their heads spinning like, that's nice. I see Terrence with about 10 pages of notes swing. What do I do now? So anyhow, the thing I think we have to come to a consensus on, I personally, and I'm just going to put it out here, let's have this discussion. I liked Don's phased approach and the manner he put it together. I thought, I had a lot of thought to it, and I thought that it was a great way to approach this. If you look at the other plans, it's actually what they did. And they were phased approaches, and they had initial steps in them, specific steps. And I think that is something that we want to try to get built on this. It might be we need to just outline a high level version of phases, what needs to be done within those, what we think it is. We don't want to get down into the detail because I don't think we really know, and that could take us to other places. But I think a high-level view of what each phase might incorporate, and then we can ask the consultants to provide us back with some the data on that stuff. Thoughts on phases, guys? Sean?
I agree. I like Don's phased approach. I like Trish's bullets. So in looking at our scope of work, the phased approach would be bullet number 2 under Don's with Trish's bullets, bullet number 3, and bullet number 5. Now, on the front end of that, we would have to do some of the scope for the consultant. But I think in phase 1, and that dovetails with what Don was laying out for phase 1, if we did 2, 3, and 5, adding Trish's bullets, I think, for me, I think that would be a very robust phase 1 and get us what we all were saying, which is the data.
Okay. Harold?
I think a critical part of the data, though, is a fresh look at the aquifer. I think
that's part of it.
Well, I'm adding the words "fresh look" intentionally.
A new look. In other words, don't just take existing or past reports and run with that. Because I, too, remember the Denver Post articles, Harold, and we were all scrambling at the time.
Fresh. Absolutely.
Right, okay. Other thoughts? Yes, Don?
Don Langley, I just want to clarify the 3 bullets from Trish's notes. They assess the current future water, include robust analysis, and identify alternative sources. That's what we would talk about adding to phase 1, correct? And fresh look.
The groundwater and
The groundwater analysis? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's right.
Yeah, bullet 2, yeah, under hers, bullet 2, bullet 3.
We're not going to look at supply and demand?
Oh, well, that happens.
That's bullet 1, right?
Well, that happens with the demand analysis, the gap analysis.
Okay.
The gap analysis is what you got, what you're going to need, and what you think you're going to have, right?
Harold?
That's included.
This is maybe too far in the weeds, but I think in terms of anticipated future sources, you've got to include the cost of it, or what we've got is what we've got. Because there are too many great opportunities for water that just cost too much, or we can't afford it, or whatever. That's part of the gap. So I think if we do a status quo where we are with the demand and where we are in the aquifer, then we look at future opportunities, and that necessitates bringing in capital
But
analysis.
you're thinking that for phase 2?
Yes, I think we're
Yeah,
phase
okay.
2. Because I've been in these before. You do phase 1 and everybody says we're done. Phase 1 needs to lead to phase 2, and I think that needs to be included, and that would be one area I would robust on the front end.
So I'm going to be bold here for a minute, and this is Jack, so that we can have at least some direction and maybe some thoughts. I would like to maybe, if we could get consensus of the commission, to have Don and even Tricia and Sean, if he wants to work together as a little subcommittee to create the phased approach outline, working with staff to come back with then a new derivative scope that compiles all this data together. And then once we have that pulled together with a new look and a fresh look then at a phased approach scope, that we can then begin to feel more comfortable about putting it out in the public to get someone to help assist us in fulfilling those ideas and those strategies.
Are you prepared to take a motion?
Yes, I do in 1 minute, if you don't mind, Roger. That would be great. I like that. Thank you, by the way. James, you've been suspiciously quiet.
There we go, James Eklund. So I had the opportunity to review Don's memo and I believe it was Harold's. I think those were the 2 that I was able to review in advance, and I thought they were really well put, and I agree with the phased approach, so I didn't submit any additional comments. Part of the trick, and I think this is, you learn from these experiences, is drafting an RFP by committee is really
Tough.
and not super efficient. So I would suggest that if we kind of go down this road again on some other document in the future, we either create a Google Doc that is capable of being edited in real time by everybody, so that you can benefit from each other's comments. Because I don't think anybody that submitted comments had the benefit of the other commenters. So it's all here. It's just now we've got to distill it down. That's the art. That's the challenge. And I think you've hit on the right way to go. And I'll be seconding Roger's motion.
Okay. I hate to call you out, Bud, but I know you've been quiet too today. Anything you want to add?
Well, I can't add anything that hasn't been said, I don't think, but a lot of good ideas today by a lot of different people.
Yeah.
But I agree, the phased approach, if you do a subcommittee that can put together this concept for us to look at again, I think that would be a great way to distill this information.
Okay.
And I absolutely agree with the comments that we need to gather the data first, see what's there, and then we can decide what the next step should be.
Okay. Jim, out there on the web, any comments? I think he's trying to figure out how to get off mute. At least I always do. Okay, I think we'll have to pass on that one. So with that, Roger, I will accept a motion for consensus.
I move that we create, this Roger Hudson with Castle Pines. I move that we create a subcommittee with a phased approach consisting of Don and Sean.
And Tricia.
And Tricia, sorry about that.
Anybody else want to participate in that, by the way? Nope. Okay, any comments on that motion? Do you have a question, ma'am? Oh, Jim is about to talk now. Before we take the let's take the second. Do we have a second? James, okay. Now, we have a motion and a second, but James, take comments now.
He might be having tech issues, so please wait a moment. Sabrina's trying to help him.
Okay, Jim's having some technical issues. We're going to give him a minute here to resolve that issue, I hope.
So you've opened it up for
As
debate, and he's up first.
Pardon?
So you've opened it up for debate, and he's going to
Yeah.
talk first.
Any other debate, thoughts on it? I personally am really looking forward to seeing what the staff can come up with the concepts and the issues that we've talked about. I agree, James. It would have been nice to get all that data. This is why we had everybody go around and speak what their thoughts were when they put this together, and now we all had a chance to look at that. When I met with staff preparing the agenda, I know Don was with me, and we were working on that to try to get that going. It became very clear to me, I'll be honest with you. I come walking in here tonight with apprehension because I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. This is going to be really interesting. So anyhow, but I think it's great. I think I like this approach. Frank?
Yeah, my only comment would be on this phased approach. Spend time on the detail on phase one. You can put what phase 2 and 3 are, but do not waste time on all the individual tasks on phase 2 and 3. How about that?
Here's one thing if this is Jack, that I can just say about that has to be taken into consideration. The commissioners are going to have to approve the submission of this RFP and this scope. And the commissioners are going to need some direction as to what to do. My concern is how many times are we going to go back asking them to reissue a phase 2 RFP and a phase 3 and additional costs here and different costs there. I think we need to come out with an all-inclusive type of a scope that has all of them so that they've got an informed decision and not have to do a phased decision point. I think it puts them in an awkward position, and I don't think we want to do that. I think we just give them something that they can either approve or deny and come back and say, all right, good try, let's do it this way or whatever. Okay? Now, James, anything else? Jim?
We're good.
Nope. I think he's not there. Pardon?
You can move on.
Are you ready to go, Jim?
You better be good.
Hey, Jim, you ready?
Going once.
It looks
Well,
like
I guess we don't
is
have Jim.
having-
I just have a question.
Clark?
So we're talking about bringing this back to our group next
Yes.
month. We're not talking about an RFP that would be broken into three pieces, that, or
Well, I think.
we're not making that decision yet.
I think until we get back the new scope that's broken out into a phased approach, I think we can have that discussion at that point. I think the problem we're going to run into, if you're funded for phase one and you issue an RFP for that, then you're going to go back and ask for phase two funding?
Yeah.
I think that would be crazy. It's either we do the whole plan or no plan. I mean, and that's my viewpoint. So we have to drive it in that way, and that's going to be the commissioner's decision, it's not ours. So I'm not hearing from Jim, so unfortunately, pardon?
This is Katie for staff. Jim did message, and he said that he just has a lot of background noise. His mic is not working. He has no additional comments, but likes the subcommittee approach.
Okay, great. Thank you, Katie. Okay, any other comments before we call for the vote? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Abstentions, raise your hand. Seeing none, we move forward, and then we'll have the subcommittee work with staff. I think Katie will be in touch with the three on that, and then we'll come out with, if you could please send us out, it's going to be, guys, I hate to tell you, it's going to be a short notice thing because we still have to provide the agenda, preparation, and get everything out to everybody. So I just have to tell you, I hope your calendars are flexible enough to adjust and adapt for that. And then the staff can work together to come up with a derivative of a different looking document for us to come forward with. But I would just like to say I appreciate all the input everyone's put into this. And like I said, I didn't do any analysis or anything on it because frankly, I don't even drink water, like I said. So, but let's leave it at that, and let's see if any closing comments. And let's just go around the room and everybody have a chance. Tricia? Sean? Clark?
Happy
Roger?
Passover.
Pardon?
Happy Passover.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
That's right.
Let's go, Harold.
Well, I just think, I think a lot of good work went into the original draft, and I don't know who was responsible for putting that together, but as a place to start, it was well done.
Yep. James?
All good?
Don?
Yeah, just one quick comment. I did ask Katie to upload the paper that was presented at the Water Congress on cost effectiveness of turf removal. So it's loaded with a lot of good data, and it's there for your reading. That is a pretty topical water conservation topic right now. So it actually puts data around the cost. I think it's useful. So it's uploaded for anybody who wants to look at it.
Frank?
Nope.
Seven? Jim, I would ask you, but I don't think you're having a difficulty. So with that, I don't have anything else to add at this point, so I would like to close our meeting for today, and we'll see you next month. All right? Thank you very much.